talk on Lyme disease. Now we're going to go over complicating factors. It's one of the biggest ones right here. It's a toxic load. All bacteria, when they feed off a protein, they make ammonia. That's how we get ammonia back in our nitrogen back in our soil for plant roots to grow, and that makes the roots, the stems, and the leaves to grow. That's how that gets back into the soil. Well, the bacteria, wherever they are, when they eat protein, they create ammonia. And if they're inside of us, infected bacteria like Lyme bacteria, Borrelia, Ehrlichia, Rickettsia, those will, as they eat, they'll start to make bacteria. First, they'll start to make nitrogen. Well, in us, whenever we have a breakdown of proteins, nitrogen is one of the things that gets released, and that goes, it's supposed to happen through the citric acid cycle inside of us, and the end result is to make urea, which the kidneys filter out of the blood and dump into the toilet for us. Well, when that happens outside of our cell functions, it just stays in the tissue. And if nothing picks it up to carry it into the blood to get it back to the kidneys, ammonia is just going to sit there. Well, ammonia, it burns. It's a base, and the only way you can tell the difference between a base and an acid, if you feel it, a base feels slippery like soap, and acid doesn't. They'll both burn your skin right off. The more concentrated ammonia, the more it's going to burn. Well, it's doing that inside wherever it's harbored, whether that's in the brain, in a joint, in a muscle, in an organ. It's just creating this toxic load of ammonia, and the worse the immune system is, the worse the circulatory system is, the more plaque it creates, the less that ammonia can get released out of the tissues, and you just sit there and burn them. And ammonia, one of the biggest things it burns is the mitochondria. Mitochondria are the powerhouses inside of our cells. There's the ones that make energy. The thyroid controls the mitochondria, but ammonia kills it. And if the mitochondria are dying, the cells can't make energy, there's no way you can heal. Well, this is a huge issue. This is a depiction of what a mitochondria should look like, and all the interaction should go on inside of the folds inside of this. This electron microscope picture of a mitochondria that's being destroyed. You can see about a third of it's gone. That's what ammonia does, this type of thing. So that's a huge complicating factor. No energy, you can't heal. And this is basically glycolysis is how we get energy out of our food, this big pathway. The thing to notice is in the purple section in the middle, on the bottom, that's where all our energy is made. That's in the mitochondria. It's almost all of our energy that happens there. So you wipe that out, you don't have energy to heal. So we look at risk factors as far as treatment care goes. Something that's widely known and accepted throughout pharmacy and all medicine is every time you give an antibiotic, it destroys the normal flora that lines your mucous membranes in the body. So that's your nose, your mouth, your ears, reproductive tracts, and gut. Well, the gut lining is supposed to have a bacterial coating called the flora, and that bacterial coating creates hormones, creates neurotransmitters. It determines the toxic pathways of the body, whether we're going to excrete them or recycle them. It does a lot as far as detoxification goes. It communicates with the nervous system inside the gut, which communicates with the brain. It controls the brain. It's huge on what goes on. Antibiotics kill off that good flora, and that lets the bad pathogenic stuff grow out of control. Yeast is one of those. This is what an extremely bad yeast infection looks like. This has gone into, yeast typically has 4 different phases to it. It's got yeast, fungus, mold, and fungal parasites. This is a fungal form along the colon wall here where it's attached, and you can tell that nothing's to be healthy inside of a gut that looks like this. This is somebody who's severely immune compromised. When we look at the lining of the gut, it's only one cell layer thick. It's not like our skin, one cell layer thick. And it's supposed to have these little fingers sticking up called microvilli. And down at the bottom where those white spots are, and that's where your immune system is. Half your immune system is inside your gut wall, called Peyer's patches, and they're little lymph nodes just underlying your gut. And that's to deal with anything that gets through the gut wall into us. So whenever you have the inflammatory issues going on, you start to have a change in these fingers. They'll start to thicken, and then they try and elongate. Pretty soon they start to atrophy. Underneath you have all this inflammatory issues, and the whole immune system is completely overwhelmed. You can't deal with everything. And once these changes go on, that lining is no longer what's called semi-permeable. It's not a selective membrane anymore. It leaks like a sieve. It lets anything go through. It's supposed to only let stuff pass through the cells, or stuff between cells, or big holes in the cells. Cells aren't selective anymore, and it lets all kinds of things into our body that shouldn't be in there. This is an electron micrograph picture of what that looks like. On the left, you have normal, healthy microvilli. On the right, hyperinflammatory. You can tell the basal layer is thick. The immune cells, the Peyer's patches, have become very thick, very dark. The whole thing's full of all this inflammatory issues, and the little fingers of microvilli are being destroyed in there. You can't absorb nutrients properly through that. And you can't keep the things that should be in the gut. In the gut, they leak into the body wall. This is one of the forms of yeast. Candida is one type of yeast. The thing in the upper right corner, that's the body of a fungus, and all that cottony looking stuff that comes out, those are feeding tubules called mycelia. The mycelia, they may look fairly harmless, but mycelia is made up of chitin. Chitin is what the exoskeleton, or the outside shells of bugs like beetles and crickets and things like that are made out of. So when you look at this, with the issue of looking at the colon, what we had before, this, when he starts to turn into this fungal form, it's like having thousands of legs of bugs like this pierced through your gut wall. Thousands. Could be millions. We have no idea. So when you have the fungal growth, it's very much like you have thousands of legs of bugs like this sticking through your intestinal wall. And anybody can figure that's not going to be healthy. Well, one of the things that's really, really important to know about the chitin with the feeding tubules coming off the fungus and the fungal parasite side. Parasite is when it starts to invade into the tissues and gets inside. So chitin, as the slide shows, is impervious to the immune system. In other words, the immune system can't do anything with it. Can't attack it, can't get rid of it, can't do anything. It's something the immune system just doesn't have the ability to deal with. And it literally blocks the immune cells from being able to recognize it. And with all that increases the intestinal permeability, which means the gut leaks to a huge extent. This will commonly happen when there's different kinds of pathological things going on. As we see from, actually it'll be the bacterial walls of the pathogenic bacteria that grow inside of our gut are made up by a type of protein called lipopolysaccharide, which is a huge irritant to the gut, and it makes it leak like a sieve. This starts to create some real major problems with the immune system. And when we look at the anatomy, basically, of the gut, you can see that all the purple right here is the vascular return, or the veins coming off the gut. That all flows to the liver. And the liver specifically placed inside of there because it's got some really huge jobs. It's supposed to catch and destroy all the bacteria and pathogens that leak through the gut. Well, the more the gut leaks, the more that it has to catch, and it can get to the point where that you get really overwhelmed. It's supposed to store your food sources, stores proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. It makes sugar out of protein when you're really stressed. Cortisol levels rise up, that dissolves your proteins, that liberates those, and it goes to the liver, and cortisol and glucagon turn on, and that creates a conversion of the proteins into sugars, which raise your blood sugars a whole bunch, and that's one of the big causes of diabetes. But this is something that goes on whenever you're stressed, or whenever the HPA axis is out of regulation. The adrenals really the crux of that one in the case of dysregulation of blood sugar. The liver is supposed to clear the body of toxins, all it's supposed to make bile. So there's a process or a system of things called cytochrome P450 that we were always taught that's how the body detoxifies, and the body detoxifies in two stages. Cytochrome P450 stage, it makes our toxins more toxic. The conjugation side, the phase 2, that makes things water soluble so we can excrete them. But in doing studies, come to find out that cytochrome P450 is how all the cells in our intestines absorb all of our nutrients. And there's more cytochrome P450 interaction going on in the gut wall than there is inside the liver. That's why dosages of pharmaceuticals and different things like that, they have to play quite a bit, because the more active your cytochrome P450 system is inside the gut, the less you absorb, which is a very interesting thing. But this is how we try and take care of a lot of our toxins. Well, one of the problems with the LPS, lipopolysaccharides, come when the bacteria are coming apart inside the gut or inside the body, is the lipopolysaccharides create a hyperreactive immune system that can result into autoimmune responses. And that's another complicating factor that goes on with chronic illness, is this autoimmune factor of what's going on. A lot of this is created by the cytochrome P450 along with the leaky gut issues. Those two, the cytochrome P450 not able to keep up with things, and everything starts to spill systemically. So when the gut wall starts to get inflamed, whether it's through pharmaceutical therapies, chronic inflammation that's going on, food intolerances that are there, a host of different factors, dysbiosis, all those can create issues. It can start to blow holes in the lining, like you see right here. And when you get holes like that, it's like anything can get its way through into the bloodstream, which will overwhelm the immune system just underneath the surface or the lining of the gut. That in turn will overwhelm the liver. They can't catch up. That spills over systemically, and there you go. You have this inflammatory fire that the immune system cannot handle, and it starts to create autoimmune responses. So when the dysbiosis gets bad like this, we know we have this kind of thing going on at a molecular level, and everything's leaking like a sieve. An interesting thing to note, when we can't excrete our toxins normally in the toilet, bowel and bladder are the primary routes, then the body tries to excrete the toxins through the secondary routes, which is the lungs and the skin. That's where you start to get all the rash issues on the skin, and that's where you start to get all the respiratory issues like asthma. It's because the body's toxic and the toxins are trying to get out the secondary elimination organs. When it can't get out of those, the toxins deposit in our fat tissues. It makes the fats toxic, and when those fats mobilize, it creates toxic overloads. Also, all of our glands that make hormones are pretty close to 50% fat. Toxins start to load into there. You start to get autoimmune responses against those glands, and then the dysregulation just goes haywire. So, not a good thing. It can be dealt with, but you got to find a clinician who really knows what they're doing to do this. Most clinicians deal with yeast on the yeast level. Very few are effective with dealing in the other four forms. You look at the forms out there on mold issues and all the symptoms going on with mold is just an example of that. People aren't finding relief. The clinicians don't know what to do with this. So once the gut starts to leak, we got the same kind of tight junctions where the cells are really stuck together really close in the circulation, in the blood vessels up in the brain. And as soon as the gut starts to leak, within 2 hours, the brain starts to leak. And the reverse happens. If there's head trauma and the brain starts to leak, within 2 hours the gut starts to leak. They're totally tied. So if one leaks, the other one's leaking. Once the brain leaks, the routes of infection are just wide open for the brain tissues. For one, it's another wide open for toxic tissues. The brain, after water, is mostly fat. You start to deposit fat in the different regulatory parts of the brain, and it dissociates brain function, and that's part of the reason why people are having the cognitive problems, the brain fog, and inability to communicate, things like that, is because the brain's just becoming toxic. So the LPS, as said a little bit earlier, it can act as superantigens for the T lymphocytes. Those are the ones that create, it's the B lymphocytes, it's the B lymphocytes that make the antibodies, the T lymphocytes that are real specific killers as far as that, superantigens for those, and those can, once those start to upregulate and get hyperactive, that's where your autoimmune issues start to come from. So here's a bigger picture of what the leak looks like. All those things lining, facing outward, those are all supposed to represent cells lining the gut, and granted it's backwards, but that's okay. Those should be tied together like they are on the bottom left. When you start to get chronic inflammation, there's huge holes and whole proteins, all kinds of things that get through there that never should get into the bloodstream, never get on the other side of the gut wall, and we start to have all these autoimmune issues going on with that. This is the same depiction that goes on in the brain. This is the tight junction in the brain. Whenever there's an inflammatory issue, trauma in the brain, or a leaking in the gut, the brain starts to leak right away too, and the two are usually tied within about a 2-hour delay. One starts and the other one about 2 hours later will start. Well, people talk about reinfection with a Herxmeyer reaction, and that's really not the case. The Herxmeyer reaction is the endotoxins, things like the LPS, being released into the blood, and you get this over-toxic reaction going on basically everywhere. So this is really a key right here. Gut function and toxicity is an absolute nightmare of a complication that goes on with Lyme disease. And once people start with antibiotic therapies, you can about guarantee this is going on. The one thing about a fair amount of the antibiotics that are out there, the real strong, broad spectrum one, some of those one dose will destroy the entire gut bacteria. Just one dose. And there's others, it takes a few doses. The idea of being able to cycle antibiotics and flora, even a good quality flora, in rotations throughout the day, it's absurd when you understand how strong it is. It's a good gesture, but it can't function, it can't work. You can't do both at the same time. Antibiotics are too strong, it kills all the good things you're trying to grow. So then you add another factor. Once the gut starts to leak, you get proteins that get into the bloodstream that shouldn't, along with other things. The direct relationship between brain function and food allergy is absolutely unrefutable through all the science. Food intolerance, huge impact there also. And there's about 2 to 3% of the food response that go on are allergies. The other 97-98% is food intolerances. So food intolerance is a much bigger issue. The science is not as clear with that because they have no idea what's going on and then no direct correlation between the two. So it becomes really a major nightmare, especially when the gut leaks, because we don't absorb things the way that we should. And it's not just proteins that create the responses with the foods. It can be any part of the food that can create it. So when we start looking at that, you look at pharmaceutical way to try and approach this is with antifungals. It's widely known that antifungals are toxic to the liver. So if your liver is already overloaded with toxins, and then you add super toxic things to the liver, what's that going to do for your healing? It's not going to be good. It's not really functional. It's what pharmacy has to offer, but there's a better approach, a better way. So the real question is, how far do you let all this insanity go? When you think about it, we're told all these things that are based upon fictitious research and protocols basically that were established before they even knew what was going on. And as far as the protocol issues, alternative medicine is just as guilty as medicine is as far as that goes. You have people run around and they peddle their ideas to their different groups. Every supplement company, good quality supplement company, have their seminars where they peddle their ideas, and there's other speakers that run around from different functional groups that peddle their ideas. Most clinicians have no functional way of assessing what's going on. And so they're just throwing things at you and hope that they're going to do something. It really is a lot more critical issue, as presented before, to find people who have different evaluative tools where they can really get to the root of what's going on and address what really needs to be addressed. So insanity, this is my favorite definition, is doing the same thing over and over and trying to expect different results. It doesn't make sense to do that. And it certainly doesn't make sense to do that without the idea of adding more antibiotics when it's already making you sick. Some of the routes of administration are lethal. And people need to be aware of that. It's better to make informed decisions and weigh things. And if that's your only option, be informed about it. Know it's your only option. Know it's your best option. And then you go forward without reservations. But get informed first. It could mean your life. It really could. So, thanks for being part of this. I hope this has helped. I hope this has given you some really good information.